Hello and welcome to the Brandon Macco podcast. I have with me today George Haymaker. Hi, George, and thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Happy Saturday morning. Nice to be with everyone.
George is an educator. He's a coach, and as I understand, he involves neuroscience. Maybe before we jump into anything else, maybe I can ask if you can sort of introduce where you are, where you're from, and maybe how you got involved in coaching and neuroscience.
Yeah, my pleasure. My name's George Haymaker, and as you said, I'm a neuroscience coach and neuroeducator. 64 years old, and I'm from Napa, California. I got into this field a little bit later in life. I've been a lifelong entrepreneur, started, founded, operated a number of small to medium-sized businesses over my lifetime. And I'm also a recovering pain pill addict and alcoholic.
Mm,
Hit a bottom about 12 years ago and had a real, come to Jesus moment. Had to look myself hard in the mirror and understand how I had gotten there, which is a whole nother story that we can go into if you like. But yeah, so I started at that moment to a path to recovery, which not only includes sobriety, but it includes, becoming a different, better, more preferred version of yourself. So I had to basically remake myself, which involved a lot of change. And the more I got into it, I started in 12-step program, Alcoholics Anonymous, but I really wanted to understand intellectually from a deeper level, like what had happened to me, why, what happens in an addicted brain, why did I become addicted?
hmm
um, how was I going to become different? What actually happens in that process?
hmm
And so it led me to the brain
hmm
because all change happens in the brain. And fortunately, the brain is very forgiving. It allows us to change, adapt, and evolve, which is called neuroplasticity. And so we don't have to stay stuck in old patterns, even really deeply rooted ones like addiction. We can actually evolve and shift out of those. So that just started my fascination with the brain. And, I kind of came out of an entrepreneurial venture a few years ago and I said, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And I had had this really deeply meaningful, transformative experience, um, falling prey to addiction and then being able to recover out of it. And I said, why don't I, as many people do later in life, why don't I take this experience and package it and help others try to achieve, transformations in their life? And so that's what I did. I got studied a bunch of graduate level courses in neuroscience, got my certification, I got coaching certifications. And so that's what I do is I help people and groups on a company level, but mostly one-on-one coaching where individuals want to know more about their brain. They may be stuck. They may be, have unhelpful patterns they're trying to break out of, and they just don't know how. And so I take them inside their brains, explain how they work, and outline a 12-week intensive program that we go through together to begin the process of helping them shift out of these neurological patterns into new ones that represent a new, more preferred way of living for them.
Probably frequent listeners will be familiar with me saying that there was a study where the doctors just spent a significant amount of time, you know, 15, 30 minutes explaining the neurology of pain to the patient. What is pain? What centers in the brain? Why pain? The why, how, what, where, and it reduced pain by 30% on average. So, like, understanding and is power. How it really does help make changes. Thinking about making changes makes changes.
Yeah, very good point. The not knowing is really freezes us in a pattern, um, because the brain doesn't inherently want to change. The brain's number one job is to protect us, keep us safe,
Hmm.
help us survive. Because when you look at evolution, what's really what evolution feels is important is that we survive, we have babies, the species continues, and that's really the brain's number one job. So it scans the environment, tries to detect threats, it tries to manage our resources internally,
Hmm.
keep our bodily systems running, all in the interest of worthwhile action and survival.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of it. It's number one job. And so if you're suggesting let's change, it's wary of that because it doesn't know what that looks like. It doesn't know that it's safe. It doesn't know that you'll be able to live through it. You're just, it's the unknown. And so that's why inherently neurologically, the brain resists change is because it just doesn't know. And so that's why knowing that and helping the brain come along with this process of information and knowing is so powerful is because, okay, we suddenly feel this significant relief when we realize that this is possible. Here's how it can happen. We introduce that information to the brain and it scans that information and says, okay, that doesn't seem like there's anything in here that's going to kill me. So, you just feel this overwhelming sense of relief and you feel this plan start to develop that, okay, I can handle this. And you start to feel some feel good neurotransmission going through yourself. And that begins to start the process, catalyzes the process of moving forward.
Oh, there's so much I can add to that. You mentioned we basically evolved for survival, and we didn't evolve for comfort.
Yeah. Pain is it life is really, and this is going to maybe bum some of us out, but life is really about our relationship to pain.
Hmm.
And so uh, how we construct, because all experiences are constructions in real time, and that's another path we could head down if we wanted to. But there is no fixed relationship to pain. All of that can be constructed, evolved, changed, and new neural pathways built around it. But pain is inevitable, right? I mean,
Hmm.
there's just circumstances in our lives, death included, which, grieving and all of that, which involve pain. And so working on our relationship to pain and constructing as positive a relationship as possible with it, and maybe reframing it, reorganizing it, building new neural pathways around it can really help enrich our lives. There's less suffering. There's more looking at it as opportunity and resilience.
Hmm. It's a big part of my postdoctoral education was what was it? It was reframe, re something. It was a set of three things to take someone through who's, for example, working through chronic pain. And one thing in the education is that, like, a lot of people, like, I wish that they taught basic biology or human biology in schools. I think it's sort of important. Everyone has a human body. You should know more about it. But pain, it isn't equal to damage. And a lot of people don't realize that.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
So a lot of people think that pain equals damage instead of
Oh,
pain is a reaction to protect you from potential damage.
yeah. It's a construction of an experience, and then we attach meaning to it. And so when we have an experience of any type, any thought, emotion, or a potential action, those all emerge in real time in the moment from a set of ingredients. Um, and a big one of the main five, the most prevalent of those five is conceptual understanding or past experiences. So when we develop a
Mhm.
relationship with pain that's unhelpful, and we continually experience that over and over again, what's happening is we are strengthening that relationship.
Mhm.
It takes the form of a neural pathway in our brain, And it's very much like taking a can of water and fertilizer over to a tree. And these pathways are like these gnarly roots at the base of a tree. And we continually do water and fertilize them. So they just grow stronger and stronger. The brain operates off repetition. And the more that we do certain things, these pathways that represent these certain things grow stronger and stronger. And so, what I try to do in neuroscience coaching is if there's some pattern or relationship with pain or whatever it is that's not helping the person, it's not how they want to experience it, then we deconstruct that experience and we reconstruct it in a new, more helpful way and begin to practice that because the brain won't start to form new neural pathways without repetition. And so that's really what you know, transformational change looks like is it's deconstructing current unhelpful experiences, getting to the roots of why we're constructing them that way, and then figuring out how we would prefer to experience those things, reconstruct them, and then practice them over and over again in real time so that we're like planting a new sapling, which represents these new experiences, and then we water and fertilize those through repetition until they grow stronger. And that's what the shifting looks like, is going from the old place where we've patterned unhelpful experiences out over and over again, and then we're planting a brand new sapling across the yard, and we're going to go water and fertilize that ongoing from here on. And so then that old tree is going to begin to weaken, go dormant, because we're not watering and fertilizing it anymore. We're going to move over here and start to, build and grow a new tree.
And it is when you were telling before about sort of protection, and I was thinking of a particular case, and for some people it is really like a light switch, and people can end into this negative downward spiral when things start to become more positive, more energy, they start to be more active, and exercise is also good for mood, and they had life goals that they thought they never achieved, but they're starting to work towards them again, and it's just this positive and positive cycle. And there's like a tipping point, I find, with a lot of people. And I was thinking of one in particular where it shocked her. I know I deal more with physical medicine. So this patient had a peripheral neuropathy, couldn't feel her feet. Now there was no longer anything wrong with the nerves, so the nerves were fine, but the brain had just forgotten how to access those proprioceptors. So the brain training was lacking. The brain forgot what is that stuff down there. I mean, it comes back surprisingly quick with neuroplasticity. Just in a few sessions of her, trying to feel things with her toes, it was starting to come back. And I think it was the second session where she went from about 50% sensation, or I think she had maybe 50 to whatever it was, 75, or maybe it was 75 to 90. And she just felt like all the muscles in her leg just relaxed. She felt like her whole body had relaxed. And you can imagine, if you can't feel the floor, you're in protective mode, everything's painful, everything's coming to get you. I can't feel the floor, I might fall. I'm in protection mode, but I could feel the floor. She just felt like, oh man, I feel like dancing. I feel so good. So that was like just this moment that even shocked her, where the brain switched from this protective mode to everything safe.
Yeah, and that's really a function of these pathways. So she used to, have those experiences, those healthier experiences, but because she had whatever had happened in her situation that caused her to adapt from those healthier ways of being, she adapted to those, formed new neural pathways around those. And once you reintroduced her to the old ways of being, she started to experience those again, which therefore caused that pathway to begin to fire again, which helped light it up again, which helped bring it back to life. And so these pathways that we have in our brain, the ones that are more active and that we our brain goes to retrieve to experience what's happening here and now and today are the ones that are most recently active. But we can go back or we construct new ones. And once we start to fire in those pathways, they come back to life. And if we continue to, practice those, they become more prevalent, predominant, and they become our new way of being.
Now, this is a bit of a theme. I think I have interviewed maybe at least a dozen coaches of some sort, and some mental health counselors, and some psychologists, and some psychiatrists now. And of course, CBT and cognitive behavioral therapy, and some people do cognitive behavioral therapy a little bit differently. Every counselor is a little bit different. And it's often portrayed as this interplay between thoughts, feelings, and actions. And you sort of, and you mentioned if you see if your client has something or a thought or an action that they don't like, that you can sort of look at it and try to find pathways which are more useful, productive pathways to reinforce instead. And it just reminded me of CBT, and it seems like there's different language for it, but it all comes back to like even Psycho-Cybernetics, famous book from the 1960s, and the self-image. A lot of metacognition, thinking about what you're thinking about thoughts, feelings, and working from that and trying to change that to something that's more productive. Is that correct?
Yeah. So what's critical though is that, and why I like, neuroscience so much is we have to understand uh, how something becomes transformative, sustainable, and permanent, right? Because you can dip into the shallow end of a pool um, and work on some behaviors or some cognitive reframing, but if you're not tethering that to the person's deepest uh, core motivational needs, things like values, their identity, which is constructed from their values, their beliefs, their strength, all of those things that make that person who they are. And if you're not tethering those things and they're running in conflict, what you'll find is that they don't stick because you have to reconstruct these new um, these new ways of being in terms of the thoughts, the feelings, and the actions, and they all interplay together. It's all dynamic. You don't have a thought without a feeling typically. They all interplay, and they all you have to reconstruct them in a way that tethers to the inner fabric of an individual, and then you have to practice them um, consistently over a period of time
Yeah.
until these neural pathways begin to
Yeah.
form and you begin to shift to them until they become the natural default. And what happens is people don't stay with them long enough to where the pathways are developed enough and there's enough reward being experienced from those new ways of being that we can easily fall back. And so understanding the neuroscience behind it all is really important because without that, you don't really understand how you can get these patterns to stick and become, your new identity.
Yeah, I've well, as someone who quit their job that they loved and changed careers just because I didn't like that healthcare was a black box and I had health problems, so I had to do it myself. I do all my own mechanic work on my vehicles. I don't like it's a black box you bring in and you don't understand, and maybe it's fixed, maybe it's not, but you don't know because you didn't do it yourself.
Right. Right.
And so I am definitely I like the idea of knowing and self-educating, um, having a deeper understanding. I think helps, and I think you brought up, or I thought of, just that every counselor, every coach, every different strategy sometimes resonates with particular individuals. With some people, Alcoholics Anonymous, I was talking to someone just last week, and the religious aspect of that really, really resonated with him. And it does for some people, and other people are off put by it. No, and thinking about in terms of the neurology works a lot better for them.
Yeah. And that's all about introducing the right reward mechanisms to the individual, because again, the brain wants to experience reward. It's not going to want to do something unless there's reward in it. So it's really important for the person to find what does work for them, what resonates with them, because our brain, won't come along with us unless it experiences reward. That's what it's built on. And so finding solutions, building a program, building a life that has reward in it is critical in order for the brain to want to come along and experience that transition.
And I had an interesting talk with someone recently in one of the trials or she was talking for trials about MDMA and and basically hallucinogens in helping in counseling, because a lot of people do have trouble, let's say, even thinking about their trauma and approaching those thoughts. Oh, sorry. Yeah, no problem. That's at 21:33. 22, about 22. Things okay? Oh,
Okay, sorry about that.
no, no problem. As I said, we were recording. I'll just cut that minute out.
Hey, sorry, my speaker cut out.
Oh, so I recently had an interview with someone who had struggled with getting over a traumatic experience. And actually, and there are studies involving hallucinogens to just try to um, get people to just start the process of trying to think differently. And and it's a little bit different from what people think. Oh, so you go to a session and you get like super high. Well, she got high once with a controlled dose in a safe place, and then once she could establish, once the counselor could establish um, or could delve into the trauma and could delve into things and and she could explore those thoughts. Then the next session, well, dozens of sessions, the drugs weren't required. It was just starting that process. Um, and sometimes, as I mentioned, I find there's sometimes this tipping point, or I've sent someone to, I think, 6 or 7 counselors, and it was the seventh one that finally had a breakthrough, um, and they could start the process of thinking differently, and actually have some change happen. Have you noticed that with your clients? Is it always super easy to delve into their values and their thoughts, or sometimes is it a bit of a struggle to get things to change?
Yeah, so I think what you're describing is, the nervous system has two branches: the sympathetic mode and the parasympathetic mode. And the brain, when it's the sympathetic is the task oriented, the analytical, the high energy usage state of the brain, and then the parasympathetic is the rested and relaxed, and more where the subconscious can be accessed. And so with the drugs and whether drugs are required or not, but I think in the case that you cited, it helps the individual get to a place where the subconscious, the parasympathetic mode is activated, the subconscious can be accessed, and you're able to get at that traumatic experience more easily when the person is not in this fight or flight mode. They're not like triggered by it, because the brain does not want to take suggestive information and work with something in while it's in task oriented mode. And so really that's what the key is, in the coaching that I do is, we've got to get people into that rested and relaxed state so that their mind isn't going a million miles an hour, because the brain will take whatever resources it has and direct it towards the task. and not be open to new ideas and new information and new ways of thinking. So that's really what we're talking about here, is getting the brain in a state, get the nervous system relaxed, rested, and open. That's where daydreaming happens, just envisioning what's possible. Our most creative states are in this parasympathetic state. And so that's what this is about, is guiding people to that state so that they're more willing and open to suggestions and changing perhaps the way that things are.
Well, I think that was a great answer to my perhaps confusing question. Um, okay, I was reading some material from about you, and a statement from the material was addiction is not a failure of willpower. And a lot of people feel, at least from the outside, a lot of people, I think there's this impression that, oh, that person has addicted, like they have no willpower. And so, why do you have that statement? Like, why is addiction not a failure of willpower? Can you explain that?
Sure. Well, there's a lot of factors that contribute to someone becoming an addict. And first of all, addiction is a disease. It's a malfunctioning of the brain systems. And sure, if someone that became an addict never drank or used, they wouldn't become an alcoholic or an addict if they were never exposed, if they never had tried it. That's not to say, though, that their brain isn't predisposed to addiction. And there's science around the predisposition of addiction. And there's certain genes that people have that get triggered, early in childhood that make them more prone to addiction. That's why you see addiction prevalent in families. So it's gene related. Mm-hmm. And then there's the component around early childhood experiences. And so if you grow up in a dysfunctional home, have, traumatic experiences early on, you're very uncomfortable in your own skin, you're constantly detecting threats, you are looking for relief from that in any way that you can find it. And so then, like in my particular case, I have addiction throughout my family. I had some early childhood experiences. So by the time that I tried drugs and alcohol, I was, 10 to 12 times more likely than the average person to become an addict. And so, what then happens is that our brains are geared at that point to seeking reward in any way we can find it, to get over these childhood experiences. We have malfunctioning reward systems in our brain where we don't experience reward from typical life experiences as much as other people. That's what this predisposition's all about. So, if you're not getting normal life pleasures out of reward from normal life pleasures, you're going to seek reward in other ways. So, and then the longer that you continue to use and drink, addiction takes a hold of you, and it becomes, it's making all the decisions. So you're no longer in control. The reward centers of your brain have taken control of your brain. The frontal parts of your brain that are responsible for impulse control are overpowered. There's no longer that normal check and balance relationship. And so, that's really why it's not a matter of willpower anymore. It's a matter of your reward network in your brain screaming out for reward to combat the malfunctions that it has.
Now, I've seen cases of giving someone that explanation, helping them in recovery. But I'll be devil's advocate here. In a different context, I've seen sort of a similar explanation, I think, hinder people's recovery. And that is, I'm thinking people who are overweight, people obesity, and diabetes. There are, of course, genetic predisposition for obesity, genetic predisposition for there are genes associated, particularly with diabetes. But diabetes, even if you have the predisposition genes, does not necessarily mean you're going to have diabetes. And type 2 diabetes is reversible and manageable. And well, in particular, I'm looking at the Board of Lifestyle Medicine. They like to use the word remission. It's in remission. You don't have any. You have no clinical signs. I would say it's not there, but they say you're in remission. Um, so, but a lot of people are like, nah, my whole family has the diabetes, so I'm just gonna get it, and it's you're and I'm like, okay, you're gonna lose your leg, you're gonna lose your vision. Yeah, my parents, that happened to them too. That's just the way it's going to be. It's like, just because it's a genetic predisposition, um, does not mean that there's no route outwards, and you can't get things under control. Even though you have a predisposition for addiction, you're not addicted to drinking 2 bottles of whiskey a day, or you don't have to do those things just because there's a genetic predisposition.
Yeah, again, if you don't use or drink, you're not going to become an addict. And so, at my early age, I knew that we had addiction in the family, so it would stand to reason that I should have been aware of that and not partaken. It does make it, once I had started, it makes it 10 to 12 times more likely that I will become an addict than I otherwise would have without those either pre-existing conditions or early childhood experiences. But the longer that you're in that pattern, your reward network of your brain begins to come hostage to the increased dopamine levels that the drugs and alcohol are providing. So normal life pleasures gives you, this level of dopamine. Drugs and alcohol give you 10 times. Mm-hmm. And so the brain is obviously attracted to reward. And so it especially if you have a predisposition to your reward networks not really working well to begin with, then you start to experience this reward and the brain is just drawn to it. And then the tolerance starts to kick in where your neural receptors begin to shut down. The dopamine can't get through. You have to keep doing more and more to have the same experience. And that's where the physiological component begins to build on itself. Now, all of this is a neurological pattern, right? The more that you do it, the more the pattern becomes, the pathway becomes ingrained, the stronger it gets. That's not to say that you have to stay in the pattern. Like any other pattern, you can shift out of it. I mean, I'm 12 years clean and sober, so I have obviously, and many other people like me, have shifted out of it. The key is to recognize that pattern is harmful. Mm-hmm. We're not going to live if we keep doing it. And we have to make a conscious choice that we're going to do whatever it takes to make a change. Then we have to introduce new ways of being. We have to separate ourselves from the drugs and alcohol, allow those neural pathways to weaken, go dormant by not firing them anymore, by not watering and fertilizing them, while we rebuild a new life with pleasures that do give us reward that we can begin to transition over time as we rehearse them. So in your earlier example of someone that enjoyed AA because they enjoyed the religious and spiritual experience, that's great. Other people might develop other programs, things that help give them reward. It could be exercise, it could be yoga, it could be, nature, it could be gardening, whatever it is that's a healthy pursuit that gives the person natural pleasure. They begin to build that new life and practice it over and over and over again, building these new pathways, and then gradually they begin to shift over to that. Same thing with a person that has an eating disorder, is they have to begin to eat differently, eat more healthy in ways that won't continue the diabetes, mm-hmm. or help them, put it into remission. And then they have to get enjoyment out of that. They begin to lose weight. They start to feel better, have more energy. They begin to look better, and just all the things that go along with having a healthier lifestyle those new pathways begin to develop. The brain begins to experience reward from them. If you practice that long enough, consistently enough, then that's what the brain will go to for its new predictions, its new experiences.
Wow, I think you summarized a really strong message there. That's sort of universal for all sorts of issues and problems. So if people want to learn more about you or to seek out your services, how could they contact you? How can they learn more?
Yeah, the best way is through my website, georgehaymaker.com. There's a link on there for a free discovery call. We can talk for 30 minutes and just talk about what the challenges that you're experiencing, how you might be stuck, and what the process of neuroscience coaching looks like, and just see if we're a good fit together.
Okay. Thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.